back to the story, burning on the front burner. Nigeria's Vice President, Professor Yemi Osinbajo, on Tuesday or yesterday called for a flexible exchange rate and asked the central bank to take a second look at its FX demand management policy. Speaking at the midterm ministerial performance retreat in Abuja, the Vice President admitted that the country's fiscal and monetary policy managers are uncooperating and without synergy of policies and actions. Joining me for a discussion on this is Senior Economist at SPM Professionals, Paul Alaje. Paul joins us live now from our Abuja studios. Good evening, Paul, and welcome to the show tonight. Let's start on the side of floating versus fixed exchange rate. And we've got a few slides to explain what is a flexible exchange rate, what is a floating exchange rate, what are the costs and benefits, as it were, the pros and cons. That's what it is. But let me start, Paul. When is it a good time for a currency devaluation or a floated exchange rate for a country like Nigeria? Give me the macroeconomic conditions precedent.
Yeah, thank you so very much for having me, and good evening. Before a country such as Nigeria should consider devaluation, maybe I should say the best time or the very good time for us to devalue is when we see that it's becoming more and more difficult for people to buy from us. That's on one side. Another one is when we see that the taste of Nigerians become unnecessarily high for imported goods. Meanwhile, those goods are readily available in Nigeria. Those are some of the reasons why we may want to devalue our currency so that it becomes more expensive for Nigeria to buy, and it will now appear relatively cheaper for local demand and local production. That's on one side. We may also want to use that to encourage local producer by making it relatively tougher and not convenient for those who want to buy foreign product. It could be medical service, it could be education, etc., etc. It could be production or service. If government may be looking at how do we stop the country from continuation of purchase or dumping ground, and one of the policies among so many other policies, by the way, is to say let us devalue and see what happens. But with the recent issue of having almost 150 to 160 naira gap between what official rate is and what parallel market is, that's a different conversation entirely. Now, you recall that in 2016, the Central Bank of Nigeria had said it will not completely float the currency exchange rate, because when you float, and I totally agree with Central Bank, by the way, because if you float, the question is the forces of demand and supply will adjudicate prices. The forces of demand and supply. So for people viewing us this moment and people that will see this program much later, either on YouTube or any platform, you ask yourself, the phones you use, where will it come from? In 2016, women in Nigeria imported human hair, that is synthetic or human hair, from around the world with over $200 million. Now, when you compare what we imported at the same period for tractor, it's almost at par with ratio of 1 to 1.03. Woman hair and tractors. So when you continue to observe how we consume, the central bank is saying that if we continue to say let's allow forces of demand and supply to adjudicate price, it will be as though we are placing Mr. Macaroni, that popular comedian, with Anthony Joshua, and say the two of them should fight in the boxing ring. The reason is because while we have effective demand for foreign products, we are not supplying enough. And the answer to that can be seen in the National Bureau of Statistics report, trade report Q1, Q2, Q3, Q4. And of course, that's all of 2020, and Q1 again this year. So when you read all the trade report, you see that we seems not to have enough in terms of FX and government revenue, to a large extent foreign earnings. It still comes largely from crude oil. So for us to say we should continue to devalue or allow forces of demand and supply, we'll be doing ourselves a lot of disfavor. So that does not mean devaluation is wrong. No, for a country like China, devaluation is good because it's producing for the rest of the world.
Yes, so if we look at the pros and cons, as it were, how will it really work? You've talked about the worst case scenario. I'm going to put this on the screen, ask my team to put what you call the best case scenario. Is there a good side to floating exchange rate? And that's what we're talking about, between a fixed exchange rate and the floating exchange rate. The office of what's the best case scenario? Maybe things will get better in the medium to long term.
Now, when you look at the best case scenario, when you float exchange rate, what is the real driver? When we start producing, let's assume that we are feeding the rest of the world, or we produce cement that the rest of the world we consume, and we allow forces of demand and supply to adjudicate prices. A lot of people around the world will be demanding for Naira. Naira will be the bride among currencies, and that will be stronger. So those of us that are working, say minimum wage of 30,000, and your 30,000 could only buy a bag of rice today, when it becomes stronger, the value of the 30,000, the purchasing power of the money will be stronger. But when you devalue and you are now exchanging less and less for dollar, then the power of the currency will indeed reduce. So it has best case, it has worst case, but for what we need to ask ourselves is what will constitute the supply side. We often talk about the demand side. What central bank is also concerned about is what will constitute the supply side. And unfortunately, the supply side of demand of the dollar has nothing to do with central bank. It is you and I that continue to demand for all of these monies, and that is why we're having the implication in terms of devaluation.
Now, in terms of how a floating or fixed exchange rate works, and we try to put a bit of this for our viewers to look at, what does it really allow you to do, and what are the things that we found out is that what it really is a floating rate, and they say it's not fixed exchange rate is not good because the central bank, but these are the pros and cons, Paul, if you follow me. If you look at the floating, it gives you room to pursue full employment, stable growth, price stability if you float it. But if you fix it, it can promote foreign trade. It's good for economic growth in the long run for developing countries. That's where Nigeria is. But if a country is suffering from economic issues, unemployment, high inflation, it is not advised to float its exchange rate. Is that the summation from your side?
Exactly my information. I'm not saying floating exchange rate is wrong, and I'm also not saying it's good. At best, it's an academic, what we could give to is academic explanation. But as an applied economist, we ask ourselves, what is our situation today? National Bureau of Statistics report over 30% unemployment rate of the labor force, over 20% unemployment rate of the labor force. Now, when you look at those, labor force is less than 90 million Nigerians. We have over 110 million Nigerians that are not part of the labor force, that are dependent on the labor force, and labor force itself is not up to full employment. So we have quite some issues. Floating our currency when we are not producing enough will be to be putting ourselves inside a room and put on the fire and hoping that the fire will put out itself with nobody helping us.
Well, stand by, Paul Alaje. We're going to deep into the second leg of this conversation after the break. Mr. Vice President has called for a coordination. He admitted, tactfully speaking, that there is no uncooperation and lack of synergy among fiscal and monetary policy managers. How did we arrive at this point? We'll be right back. Welcome back to the program. Nigeria's Vice President has given a damning admission on Monday as he laments the lack of synergy and cooperation between the country's fiscal and monetary policy officials. Paul Alaji of SPM Professionals is continuing this conversation with me on the show now. Thank you so much, Paul, from Abuja Studios. How weighty was this public admission by Mr. Vice President that in the same administration, fiscal officials and monetary policy officials are not cooperating? There's no synergy.
It's very weighty, and it's also very damning, even though many analysts have spoken about this before now, that there is no convergence between fiscal authorities and fiscal policy and monetary policy. And this is so evident because as much as central bank are kept interest rate low, we still observe that economy is not growing at a faster pace as much as we would expect. We have also seen that fiscal authority have continued to make some policy because of certain goals they intend to achieve. Monetary authority, of course, the core mandate is stability, price stability, and exchange rate stability. What the two authorities have not done is to come together to say what is the national goal of exchange rate stability, price stability, high GDP growth rate, low unemployment, low inflation rate, etc., etc. Now, because some of these two authorities, which is evident in Ministry of Finance, Budget and National Planning, and so many other agencies that is related to that, and you may want to add work, housing, and so many other things within the real sector into that bracket. With central bank, of course, whose core mandate is monetary nature. So because of all of, we are seeing not the kind of report we are supposed to see. It is obvious for even non-economists to say there is no effective convergence or communication, and they are not agreeing to a large extent. And that is why we are getting to a point where, upon all the policies central bank has adopted, we are still not seeing that result within the economy.
So in terms of, they're not communicating or they're not cooperating. So technically speaking, the fiscal authorities and the monetary authorities are working at variance. In the manner of speaking, the left hand does not know what the right hand is doing under the leadership of a single administration. That's quite damning. If it takes the vice president to say, we appeal to you folks to work together, the Central Bank of Nigeria, with the Ministry of Industry, Trade and Investment need to know what you're doing. The Ministry of Agriculture needs to know what you're doing, your interventions in SMEs. The Central Bank is moving speedily along those lines. The ministries, technically, who are largely headed by political appointees and others, are sitting back and watching. Now it's taking the intervention of the Mr. Vice President to see whether they will be on the same page. That's good for the economy.
Well, you know, Mr. Vice President is in charge of the economy, as we know, and so I think he's in best position to know. And if you ask me as economist, I will tell you that it's evident for us to see. As we speak in Nigeria, what is our import bill on sugar? Even though we have a sugar policy, because that belongs to the Ministry of Trade and Investment, that says that we will have reached sugar sufficiency before 2018, 2019, at worst case scenario 2020. This is 2021. The last report by Sugar Council showed that we imported 1.24 million metric tons of sugar without producing in Nigeria, according to what is available on the website of Sugar Development Council. That on one side, we continue to import. When you look at even government officials, you can use legislature as an example. Mr. President has just laid a 2022 budget before the National Assembly, both chambers. What proportion of the vehicles that we are presenting will be coming from Nigeria? So Central Bank is saying, let us see how we're going to save the Naira, to save the soul of Naira. But fiscal authority, evident in government, continue to import. So we are not aligning. What proportion of what we have in the budget is available in Nigeria? That is the first place to start.
In a manner of speaking, the central bank is working with the automobile producers, for example, to increase local content and what have you. But here you have the ministries and parastatals, when they want to make budgets for cars for the new year, under the new budget, is the one that comes from Japan, China, US, whatever.
Exactly. That's a
divided household.
It is. Look at central bank also saying that we need to conserve Naira. Now, if you devalue, you are going to now pay more in subsidy because you don't want to remove subsidy because there are not enough palliatives. That is a good argument on the side of government. So if you don't remove subsidy and you devalue and exchange rate goes to about 500, official rate to 530, you will now need to pay not 1 trillion you are paying now for subsidy, but about 1.5 to 2 trillion, which means you will now go back to borrow more money and put yourself in a deeper mess. So we need to look through, we need a comprehensive look. Central Bank and Monetary Authority are doing their bit. Fiscal Authority is also doing a bit of the economy. But we need a coordination of the entire economy so that we have
coordination. Paul, why is this coordination synergy? Why is it difficult to achieve? Because the central bank is independent, but it's under the Federal Republic of Nigeria. The same thing as cabinet ministers. So my question is, when they sit down for cabinet meetings, National Economic Council meetings, what do they discuss? If they're not, there's no synergy, if there's no cooperation.
Well, I'm not yet a member of the Economic Council, so I may not know exactly what they discover. What is available in public domain indicates that we are not seeing that communication, we are not seeing that coordination, we are not seeing that the agreement that is expected for the economy to work. If the economy works, it will be very easy for us to see. I tell you, we have children in school right now. The school uniform they will put on, for those that will buy new uniform, we still come from outside Nigeria. While we may not want to close our borders for people importing because of WTO, we are saying central bank will continue to encourage local manufacturers, particularly those in textile, to say, we are going to support you. Tell banks, commercial banks, to give maybe special interest rates to those that are in textile industry. What is the position of government? Make policy to tell those that are old schools to patronize made in Nigeria and provide them with incentives.
Okay, so Paul,
that is when we will now see that effort of central bank will be yielding some kind of benefit that we expect.
So this two-day ministerial retreat was about performance of ministers. President Buhari this afternoon says the independent report shows that significant progress has been made by ministers in their portfolio assignment. Do you agree with this assessment? Of course, now we're going to cooperate. Mr. Vice President has given everybody the go-ahead, the marching order to do that. But are we seeing significant progress in reality on the ground that the ministers are working in terms of performance?
Well, for those that are managing infrastructure, I've seen quite a number of improvements in roads. More importantly, Lagos-Ibadan rail project is obvious for people to see. I've also seen some level of improvement in how government has been trying to manage issue of security. We have seen militaries now on higher energy than what it used to be this time last year. But we still have quite a number of things to do. Economy is still a huge challenge. It's still a huge concern. So if I've seen the new the president budgeted for security over 2 trillion naira, but even if we budget 5 trillion, an economy is not fine enough. It's going to be a lot of challenge. So why those in infrastructure, particularly, for example, the two ministers I've mentioned, we have seen their works, in infrastructure, road and rail. I also hope that the minister in agriculture will not only wait for the central bank to only say we have a borrowers program and so on and so forth. The minister can create his own program that can help farmers so that we can have excess supply and reduce food inflation. When we have excess supply, food inflation will certainly reduce. But when everybody wants to wait for central bank, the minister has a bank he can liaise with, Bank of Agriculture, and encourage more and more farmers to patronize that bank. While central bank is doing a bit as monetary authority, those that are ministers of government, and I think that may be one of the reasons why the former minister was excused, for us to have a new person. So I hope that in the coming period, the impact of the minister that we have not felt their impact enough. Mr. President was the one that set the criteria for performance. So to him, they might have been satisfied. But to Nigeria, we might just need to feel the impact more than we have right now.
We thank you, Paul Alaji, Senior Economist at SPM Professionals, for your insights on this issue. Do have a great evening and see you next time.